Hi everybody, my name is Stefan for a.com, and in today's tutorial we are going to be creating a cool particle transition using trapcode form. Let's take a look. Yeah, really cool. So let's start with the tutorial. The first thing we are going to do is to select our footage and drop it into a new comp. Rename the composition. This is our video 1, and by the way we are going to use the HD TV preset. Hit OK. Now create another new composition for our A.tuts logo and make it 10 seconds long maybe. OK. Drop the logo inside. Hit S to reveal the scale property of our logo and change it to maybe 230. Yeah, looks right. Also turn the continuously rasterize switch to make the layer vector so it not gets blurred, as you can see here. Now let's animate the logo a little bit, because as you can see in the final example, the logo comes back like so. So we need to make this animation here. Come to 2 seconds and 10 frames maybe, and set a keyframe for scale, and 2 seconds later we are going to change this to 150, so we have a smooth animation. Now let's create another composition where we will be creating our video transition. So composition, new composition, video transition, and make it 6 seconds and 27 frames long, and hit OK. Drop inside our video, and our A.tuts logo composition. We need to trim a little bit the A.tuts logo composition, so maybe right here, yeah. Select it and just trim it like so. You can move it and move the layer like so, just trim it. Okay, and move it to the right side of the composition. So we need to create a fade between these two elements. Select the two layers and hit T to reveal the opacity property, and come to 3 seconds and right here maybe, and set a keyframe about our A.tuts logo layer and set it to 0. Also set a keyframe for our video composition and leave it as it is to 100, and maybe 10 frames later press shift and hold it down and press page down to move forward 10 frames. Now change the A.tuts opacity to 100 and our video opacity to 0%, so we have a smooth fade between these two elements. Very simple. Now let's move on. We need to create a copy of this video composition right here. We need to create 2 copies of this composition. It's very important to create the copies of this composition right here in the project panel instead of the composition, because we will create our final composition right now. Final composition, 10 seconds long. Okay. Why we need to duplicate this composition here in the project panel instead down here in our final composition? Because if we drag this composition here and hit Ctrl D to make a duplicate and open one of the compositions and turn the layers off and come back to our final composition, the other composition also will turn off these layers. So whatever changes I make in this composition, they will take effect in this composition right here. So in order to solve this problem, delete these compositions, open our video transition composition, turn the layers on, and let's close this down. Select the composition here and press Ctrl D twice to create two copies. The one copy we will use it for an alpha map in trapcode form, so rename it, hit return, and rename it alpha map. And the other composition we will use it for a displacement map in trapcode form, so hit return again and name it displacement map. Okay. Now let's select our alpha map, displacement map and video transition and drop it in our final composition. Let's turn off the displacement and alpha map. Now we are going to create a new solid layer for our trapcode form, so come here to layer, new, solid, doesn't matter what color, and name it form. Here, okay. And apply trapcode form, effect, trapcode form. Okay, let's move this a little bit, close this down and open our base form. So what we need to do here, we need to, so the size we are using for this comp is 1280 by 720, and make the particles in X 1280 by 720 and particles in Z 0. We don't need any particles in the Z space. Let's turn off for a second our video transition so we can see better our particles. As you can see, we have our particles here, but we need to increase their number, so particle in X 430 and particles in Y 240. We have a lot more particles now. Let's move on to, we are done here. Let's close this tab and open the particle tab. So we have particle type sphere, leave it as this, and the only thing we are going to change here is the size of the particles. Bump it to 2 maybe, so our particles are bigger and they fill the screen better. Now let's close this tab and move on to our layer maps. Open this tab and you can see we have our core and alpha map, and we will use our composition which name is alpha map for our alpha map. Open the core and alpha, select our layer alpha map, functionality RGB alpha, and map over X and Y. In this way our particles will represent the video used in this alpha map layer, as you can see here. Let's drop down the resolution to half so we will work faster. As you can see here, the particles represent our video, and that's fine for the moment. Let's come down to the displacement tab and open it, and functionality individual XYZ, map over X and Y, and we will use our displacement map to displace only in the Z-axis our particles. So select our layer for Z, our displacement map, and you can see that our particles are displaced already by the displacement map. Now let's close this down and come here to the fractal field section and change something, maybe the flow Z to a 50. So when we displace our particles, they will fall in the Z space. And let's change the F scale to maybe 8 in order to decrease the detail when we turn up the displacement. As you can see, if we change it back to 10, we have a lot more detail, and we have less detail now when we change it to 8. So you can play with the values here. I will leave it to 8. Now it's time to animate some of the parameters of trapcode form. So the first thing we are going to animate is our fractal strength. Come back to layer maps and displacement, and we'll animate our strength. What will affect this parameter is we'll displace our particles in the z-space. Let me create a camera for you to see better. New camera, OK. Select the camera orbit tool, and you can see when I change it to 0, our particles are less displaced by the displacement map, and when I change it to maybe a 300, you can see our particles are flying around, some of them forward, some of them backward, and so on. So we need to animate this value here. Come to 2 seconds and 15, 17 frames maybe, and set a keyframe and change it to 0 for the strength. Now come to 3 seconds and 7 frames mark maybe, and change this to 200. So you can see our particles are a lot more displaced in the z-space, and maybe a second forward at 4 seconds and at 2 frames maybe. Change it back to 0, and we are done with this animation. Close this down and open the fractal field. Select the form layer, hit U to reveal the keyframes. Come here to our first keyframe, and we'll change the displacement mode from XYZ linked to XYZ individual. So we will change this to 0, and we want our particles only to displace in the z-space. So if we turn this up, you can see our particles are displaced only in the z-space. So change this to 0, set a keyframe about it, come here to this keyframe, and by the way I'm holding down shift to snap to the keyframes, and change this to 300. So our particles are a lot more displaced now, and come here to the last keyframe and change this back to 0, like so. The other thing that we are going to animate here is the disperse option. Open it and come here in the beginning to our first keyframe and set a keyframe for disperse. Now move to the next keyframe and set the disperse to 2, and this way our particles doesn't look so perfect. And come here to the last keyframe and change it back to 0. We are done with the animation of trapcode form. Now select the form layer and hold down shift and press T to reveal the opacity property, and come here to the first keyframe and set a keyframe for our opacity and leave it at 100, and hit U to reveal all the keyframes to see everything better, and maybe move these keyframes backwards like so, and change the opacity here to 0. So what we have is trapcode form fade in, displaced, and now come back to normal at the end, and set a keyframe about opacity here at 100, and maybe 5 frames forward change it to 0, so we have a smooth fade out of the form layer. Now we need to create this fade between our trapcode form and our video transition, so turn on the video transition composition, and we need to animate the opacity, but before we do this, add a fast blur effect, blur and sharpen, fast blur, and click the repeat edge pixels checkbox. Now come to 2 seconds and let me see, and 12 frames, and set a keyframe about our blur. Also press T to review the opacity property and set a keyframe for our opacity, and you can close this down and hit U to review all the keyframes. This way we will work a little bit faster and easier. Move down to maybe 2 seconds and 22 frames and change our opacity to 40% maybe, and then come to 2 seconds and 27 frames, change our blurriness to 255. After that we are going forward at 3 seconds and 20 frames maybe, and set a keyframe for our opacity again and at 40%, and then come here to 4 seconds and maybe here 10 frames and set our opacity to 100. So what we have now is our video composition fades out and blurs out, then the form appears, it fades in, we have our transition, and again form fades out and our video transition fades in. So we need to animate the blurriness for our video transition composition. Come to 3 seconds and 4 seconds, let's say, and set a keyframe about our blurriness and set it to 150, and then maybe 3 frames forward, change it back to 0, so we have a nice fade in of our video transition composition. Let's close this down and unsolo it. We need to animate our camera so it will turn around our particles. The first thing we're going to do is to reset our camera, and then add a new object from layer, new object, and make it 3D, and link the camera to the new object. Actually, let's rename this new object to camera control, and let's see here we have our position of the camera and we have the rotation. We are going to use the Y rotation of the new object. As you can see, we are rotating around our particles. Change this to 0 and let's animate it. Come again to 2 seconds and 12 frames and set a keyframe about our Y rotation, and also for our position, and let's close this down and hit U again to review only the keyframes, and also set a keyframe about camera's position. Okay, let's move forward to 3 seconds and 7 frames maybe. Let's see, yeah, our keyframes are here, and change the Y rotation to -90 and change the camera Z position to -415 maybe. This way we have turn around our trapcode form particles and zoom in into the particles. So we are surrounded by the particles. If I undo this, you can see the transition, how it looks. It's just a transition. So we need to set a keyframe about camera Z position to zoom into the particles. Minus 400 and whoa, that's too much. Minus, yeah, that looks right. And the next thing we are going to do is come right here, I guess, change this to minus 180, and the camera position, just copy this keyframe, Ctrl C, and paste it, Ctrl V. So we have, let's turn on the video layer. We have our baseball player hits the ground, and then the particles shoot up and they are displaced. We have the camera move and the AE-TUTS logo, but as you can see, the AE-TUTS logo is flipped, so we need to fix that because of the 180-degree movement of the camera. We're looking the logo from the other side, so we need to flip the logo for the AE-TUTS composition. So come to our alpha map and select the AE-TUTS logo, hit S to reveal the scale, unlink the scale and set it to minus 100. So it is flipped here, but in our final composition the logo will look fine, as you can see, but we need to change this also for the displacement map, so we have properly displaced particles. So open the displacement map, again hit S to reveal the scale, unlink it and change it to minus 100, and in our final composition we have our beautiful form transition. Let's create a short run preview to see how it looks. Now the preview is done, so let's see how it looks. Yeah, beautiful, perfect. Some sound effects and it will look awesome. I think we are almost done with this. Don't forget to turn the motion blur for the trapcode form layer. It will render much slower with the motion blur, but also it will look better, much better, I would say. And the last thing we're going to do is to add some shine effects and maybe a glow to the form layer. So select our form layer, come here to effects, stylize glow, and change the settings of the glow a bit. Glow threshold, set it to 100, glow radius to 50, and glow intensity to 0.5, so it is not so intense. And now let's add adjustment layer, layer, adjustment layer, and name it shine, shiny shine. So it, and add shine trapcode shine. Okay, turn off the motion blur so we will work faster now. And what we're going to change here, maybe the colorize, set it to whatever preset you want, heaven maybe. I think I used this in the original example. Let's see, transform mode, screen, yeah, it looks fine. And now let's animate the source point. So come here to 2 seconds and right here when the particles start to displace, and set a keyframe for our source point and change this to this side of the composition. Also set a keyframe for shine opacity and change this to 0, and maybe 20 frames forward right here. Set the shine opacity to 100, and at the 5-second mark also set a keyframe for shine opacity at 100. Let's hit U to review the keyframes. Set a keyframe for shine opacity, and at the 6 seconds mark set the shine opacity to 0, and maybe change this to the other side of the ATETS Plus logo. Yeah, that looks fine to me. So let's turn on the motion blur and make a RAM preview to see how it looks. And here is our preview. Let's see what we've created now. Yeah, very cool. Well, I guess that's it for this tutorial. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Once again, I'm Stefan for atets.com, and see you next time.